Tuesday last week, President Uhuru Kenyatta was pissed off, as some analysts, I read an article, was opining about the state of the country as far as the war on corruption is concerned. It was an accountability summit that was being held at State House, and he was saying he's receiving a lot of the criticism, and yet there are independent bodies, watchdogs, that are supposed to be ensuring the war on graft is on track. So let's listen to some of what he had to say, and then I'll introduce my guests to you this evening.
He releases people on bond here every day. Who does? Sinini. Eh? What does that got to do with me? What does it got to do? I don't even have power, like I said, to appoint you or to sack you. So, mnataka nifanye nini jameni? That I have not done.
All right, President Uhuru Kenyatta believes he's done the best he can in as far as the war against corruption in Kenya is concerned. Let's hear what my guests in studio think tonight. Next to me is Moses Kajwang, who's Homa Bay Senator. Also with us is Statue Member of Parliament Ndungu Githinji. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. So pissed off, wasn't he, did you think, the president, over corruption and the criticism he gets?
Thank you, Sophia. It was quite embarrassing. I felt embarrassed on behalf of the president to see him admit incompetence and incapacity to deal with one of the greatest problems facing this nation today, which is corruption. We must not forget that the president of the Republic of Kenya is Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Whether he got 50+1% of the vote, it does not matter. We have accepted, we in the Code Coalition, we in the opposition, that the president of the Republic of Kenya is Uhuru Kenyatta. He cannot pass the blame to other institutions. No one is asking him to sack the heads of independent institutions that are mandated to deal with corruption.
Right.
We are asking him to provide leadership, because that's what a president does.
Hasn't he provided leadership if he'd argue when he sacked his cabinet secretaries? Wasn't that providing? Didn't you all, even in the House, applaud him for that
remember
move?
During this summit,
yes,
the president himself admits that it was a blunder in the first place, that he sacked people from his cabinet, and now these people hate him. These people campaign against him. Irrespective of the standing ovation that we gave him at that particular moment, upon further analysis, we advised the president that that was the wrong move. He could not come with a list to Parliament, a list that has been produced by the CEO of the Commission, not the Commission itself, and then give the judiciary 60 days to complete cases. He does not have that power.
How does that leadership you want him to show look like?
Corruption is not just a legal issue. Corruption is a moral, ethical, social issue. Yes, we've got laws. In fact, Kenya does not have a shortage of laws when it comes to dealing with corruption.
Right.
We do not have a shortage of institutions. But we must get that leadership from the highest level in this country. And that leadership, number one, must show zero tolerance to corruption. You ask yourself, you as a president, are there issues that could besmirch you? You are deputy. Are there issues surrounding him? And Sophia, we are in a situation where we've got a government and a presidency whose only motivation to leading this country was to solve the ICC dilemma that was facing them.
Okay,
Once ICC was sorted out, let me just finalize it. Once ICC was sorted out, the president has gotten to his wit's end. It was by his own admission last week that he has done what he can do. And so now Kenyans are on their own as far as corruption is concerned. I think we are going into very difficult times as Kenyans, because when it came to security, the president told us that security starts with you. With corruption, he has told us corruption, the problem is other people and not him.
Let's bring in Ndungu Githinji. You've had a lot,
A lot, I don't want to say a lot of nothing, but my brother here is a very good friend of mine, and we debate at all levels. But I think it's very clear that the president was bemused, frustrated, because this bogeyman of corruption that exists not in Kenya, in the world, and that we're all grappling with. Corruption is a human condition. It's not an African condition or political condition. It is a human affliction. It exists in every sector of society, in the churches, in schools, in government, in private sector, everywhere. The president is bemused and a little befuddled because the Constitution 2010 disempowers the presidency from acting directly in areas of investigation, in areas of conviction, in areas of jurisprudence.
Right.
It empowers, very specifically, independent institutions which he does not even control by appointment or sacking, and gives them the power to investigate, adjudicate, and such like, and prosecute, and so on and so forth. So if these institutions, which are empowered by the Constitution, which we said yes to and we created, are frustrating the fight against corruption in one way or another, or if there's a bottleneck or a backlog in one institution,
right,
where everybody is channeling and funneling all this information and cases of corruption into one institution, and this particular institution is not acting, of course there's frustration. And for me, and it's very unfortunate, that my brother here and others in court would look at corruption as a political thing. Corruption is not a Jubilee thing. It's not a Kikuyu or Kalenjin thing. Corruption is a human thing, because we are all corrupt in one way, shape, or form. Whether it's morally, spiritually, economically, in one way, shape, or form. In the private sector, in the public sector, in the faith-based sector, in the NGO sector, everywhere. So we together must look at this as a collective problem and find ways and devise mechanisms in which to address, not point fingers. He can point fingers from here to eternity. It doesn't solve anything.
And Court leader Raila Odinga disagrees with you. He doesn't think it's a societal problem. He thinks it's a Jubilee problem. Let's listen to what Raila Odinga had to say in response to that particular summit and what the president said.
Accept that the crooks milking Kenya dry operate from the heart of the Jubilee government, with the offices of the president and that of the deputy president leading from the top when it comes to stealing from Kenyans.
All right, so he's saying this is a Jubilee problem. But on one hand, watching that particular summit, the president says there are public institutions, independent, that are charged with fighting graft. And so they were each asked, so what is it you don't have? How is it that you're incapacitated that I can help? But we also saw passing of the buck. The judiciary was criticized for the slow manner in which they're canvassing the matters that come before them. But they also criticized the other bodies, saying the matters being brought to them are not, sometimes there are shoddy jobs that have been done, so they have to be taken back. So it's a back and forth. So away from the presidency, where you say that there needs to be leadership, do you agree that the judiciary is dropping the ball, or do you see it as the entire system that's broken?
The assertions by Right Honorable Raila must be seen in context, within the context in which they were uttered, because he spoke of many other things, and he said exactly what I've said, that it is not a legal thing. It is social, it is ethical, it is much broader.
Right.
It is not just a Jubilee thing. One issue that we must narrow down on, Sophia, is that the money that is being stolen by the corrupt is the money that we pay as taxes. That money we would have used it to educate our children and feed ourselves.
Right.
It is a money that is being borrowed in form of Eurobond, and people are disappearing with it. But
That's
let's
not even
ask
true.
ourselves,
Let us
ask ourselves, because you have not even allowed the Auditor General. You are intimidating the Auditor General from conducting investigations.
This same Auditor General who has cases against him being investigated by the EACC. Is that the one we're talking about? Is that the Auditor General that we're discussing?
The Auditor General
that you're not even pointing out.
Is an independent body according to the Constitution. The President calls him to State House in his residence and belittles him. And
is he
tells
more
him that
independent than the EACC, who are also there? More independent than the judiciary, who are also there?
He
was addressing all the independent bodies. Why is he singling out
which is heckling me again?
The Auditor General?
This is the same EACC. The President sneaked a list to Parliament, a list which last week he said that on hindsight that it was wrong. The
he never
same
said
Auditor
it was wrong.
General,
he never said
the
that.
public audit,
the
public audit bill that was passed by both houses of Parliament, and in Senate it passed by one vote, is the bill that has watered down the powers of the Auditor General. I am illustrating the systematic and deliberate weakening of the institutions.
Diatribal
No, you will have your time. Okay. I'm just highlighting factual weakening of institutions that the president claims that he has strengthened.
So you're saying they're failing because, again, it's the president's fault?
It is the presidency and the government that has killed the EACC. We know how the first chairman, Matemu, We know how Kinisu left. We know what happened to the commissioners.
Right.
We know what has happened to the Auditor General through the watering down of his powers through the amendments called the Public Audit Bill. And we know that these bodies have not been given the resources that they need to execute their mandate. So the president was lying to the nation by saying he has facilitated
EACC that he is saying has been weakened, has been eviscerated, has no teeth and no power. This same EACC, which is investigating the Auditor General, who he is now defending, here saying that he was being pointed out by the president as an independent institution. There were 5 independent institutions on that podium. Why is he only talking about one? The judiciary was there, the EACC was there. Why the Inspector General of Police was there? Why is he only singling out the Auditor General?
One wrong
Let me
make
finish.
another
Let me
right.
finish. Let me finish.
Yes.
I mean, it's very clear what he's trying to do. He's trying to defend him because he knows that that office holder, not the office holder has an issue. EACC is investigating him. Even in the Nairobi County, when the EACC investigates allegations of corruption and even has evidence of the same, and goes to investigate and look into accounts. What does the judiciary do? They give orders saying that nobody can investigate the accounts of the governor or his wife or other officials of the Nairobi County government. What is that? Are you frustrating or supporting the fight against corruption?
So as far as you're concerned, all of these institutions are failing Kenyans.
What I'm saying is, Kenyans, individual people are corrupt. Governments are not corrupt. Individual people are corrupt. And if you put those people in the places where they have access to office or institutions where they can make judgments and decisions, those people will frustrate the fight against corruption. And I'm surprised, Sophie, I'm very surprised and very disappointed that my brother here would sit here and tell Kenyans about corruption in Jubilee. What about East African Spectre? We know that the ethanol that was being produced, that was meant for the export market, finding its way back into Kenya, that's going into Changadens and places where they're making illicit brews to kill our children.
Is EACC investigating that?
We know this. Of course,
Who's
it is actually a file in EACC. What about Kenya Airways? What about Kenya Airways? What about Kenya Airways? Investigations should be ongoing. In Kenya Airways, we know even it was an issue in Parliament where the former Prime Minister is involved with the airline in doing business which is, on the verge of being
allegations have been made. He has refuted the same.
It was in Parliament. It was on the floor of Parliament. It was debated.
I want us to look
even over and above politics. Let me say this. Over and above.
Hold on.
Well, you started with Jubilee, so we have to talk about
capacity ends.
No.
When we have to invoke the name of Raila.
All right, gentlemen, listen.
The point I was making. The point I was making is this. We as Kenyans need to address this issue of corruption in its entirety and collectively. We cannot use it for politics and let people come on stage and start saying, Jubilee, the president, and Jubilee and the president are corrupt and are aiding and abetting corruption. Yet in their own backyard, even in Kisumu. What's this story about Ranguma's accounts and the money that was taken from the public coffers there? Yet EACC is investigating, nobody's talking. Did you hear my honorable member, my brother here, talking about it?
Isn't that a process that's already ongoing? What is wrong with the process that's ongoing?
What about immigration department? In the last 25 years. What about the selling of Kenyan passports to Somalis and national identification documents to foreigners illegally? Nobody is talking.
Listen, 1 second. At this point, what you're highlighting is really the issues we're facing as a country. And this is the question one would put to you. President Uhuru Kenyatta is seeking re-election. And he has stood before Kenyans and said, I have done all I can. So why should Kenyans re-elect somebody who's coming in front of them and said, I have done all I can. There isn't more I can do. So what is he hoping to do in his next term? Because what you're also talking about is a problem, yes, across whether it's Jubilee, whether it's CORD. But you're not telling us what are those clear measures that will change strategy, because he's frustrated. He feels is done enough.
Oh, so absolutely. There are many clear measures. In fact, even in Parliament, new legislations have been passed, and the corruption bill is coming before the floor of the House. There are many subsidiary legislations which are coming to deal with corruption, with bribery, with influencing tenders, and so on and so forth. This is what Parliament is doing as an institution. So we have played our part. We are playing our part. EACC has brought over 400 cases before the judiciary for prosecution. They have played their part. The Inspector General of Police is investigating cases on a daily basis.
All right.
The Director of CID investigating cases, passing to the DPP, DPP taking to court. But what happens? You know,
there's only been one conviction last year out of 5,551 matters that were being investigated by the EACC. There was only one conviction.
Let us talk about the elephant in the room, Sophie. You can only convict when a judge is willing to convict.
And the judge can only convict if there's sufficient evidence brought. They'll not just convict because they need to convict.
How about this? So the lawyers come and file application upon application, some in the Constitutional Court, barring investigation, prosecution, and arrest of individuals. So what does one do? I mean, if that is the role that the judiciary is playing in protecting and shielding suspects of corruption, then there's a serious problem. And my brother here, who is a lawyer, should give us a way out of that.
It is not the first time that a president has admitted that he's incapable of doing something that he was entrusted to do. It is not the first time. Uhuru is not the first president to say, nimeshindwa. But the difference is that in those other cases, those presidents or leaders or sovereigns have resigned because they are incapable of doing the job that was entrusted upon them.
So
and in some cases, like Japan, they've committed suicide. We are not asking
hold on, let him.
We are not asking Uhuru to commit suicide.
Why are the judges
we are not even asking him to resign because we know we are going to beat him. Unfortunately,
good luck with
the
that.
president who has admitted that he has failed to tame corruption, he has failed to tame insecurity in this country because it starts with you who's watching.
Speaking of that, I want us to put up...
just a minute.
Yes.
He's seeking another term. He wants to be elected for another 5 years, and he wants his deputy to be elected for another 10 years. 15 years, 20 years of hopelessness, of corruption.
Gada's satirical piece was on what you've touched on not only the security question, but also on corruption. My director, if you could please put up, it was on the Sunday Standard, in case you missed it. This is what Gada's piece looked like today. And just to point a finger at what he sees perhaps as the biggest problem we're facing in the country, so that at the end of the day, it looks like we have a government that at the end of the day, when it comes to security, it begins with you. When it comes to corruption, I've done all that I can. Do you look at that and get concerned as a supporter of
Absolutely
Jubilee?
not. Absolutely not. You know, again, we seem to forget or want to frame a narrative that Kenya is the same Kenya when President Moi was in power with the same constitution. It is not. We have a new constitution that has clear separation of power and has substantially disempowered the president in terms of acting directly in areas where we want to see results, like the judiciary, appointing judges, and so on. He cannot do that anymore. He cannot even appoint the EACC. He cannot appoint the IG of police. He cannot sack them or fire them. So he is beholden to the constitution and to the independence of institutions and to the separation of powers.
So did we make a mistake in the constitution? Did we whittle down too much the powers of the president?
Personally, I think we did.
Okay.
But you see, the point here is this. My brother Moses and others will stand here and say the president has failed because he's not able to do A, B, and C. Yet they're the ones who drafted the constitution and said yes to it and campaigned for it to be there so that they can disempower the president to create independent institutions which they felt secure and safe with. Now that we have those institutions and they are failing, they're pointing back at the president who has no power to deal with them in the manner that they want. So the point I'm making is this, Sophie. Let us be honest. This is politics that they want to do with corruption.
Yeah.
If it's going to be politics to do with corruption, let's talk about everybody who is corrupt in politics.
And speaking of everybody who is corrupt, you've said...
And we know their cases. We know them.
All right, you've said the buck stops with the president. He's made an argument that it's the entire society that's corrupt. Raila Odinga, in an interview on Al Jazeera, was questioned about has he ever received a bribe or given a bribe. He said he had. He was asked on what action did he take on those corrupt individuals who were then in his office and who was prime minister. And he was hard pressed to answer that question. So when there are those who look at it and say this is a double standard, this is an issue that's affecting the country, but it's being politicized. What do you say to those
Sophie,
people?
today the president of the Republic of Kenya is Uhuru Kenyatta. It is not Raila Odinga. So it is upon him to provide solutions to the problems facing Kenya.
But he has been in government. The question is, he has been in government, but whilst he was there, we did not see, because I've put to him, why does Kenyatta want re-election when we haven't seen much? So I'm putting to you, he's been in government, he could have done much, and there are those who argue not much was seen, so why also should he be
We are
elected?
not asking for solutions from the Prime Minister of 4 years ago. We are asking for solutions for the President of today. The problem we have in this country, the tragedy, is that we've got a President and a Deputy who have a responsibility to respect and implement and enforce a constitution that they do not believe in. They never believed in it when it was
How can you make a valid
during the
judgment about
campaigns.
what we do or do not
Well,
believe?
the deputy
You're not
president,
qualified. My brother, you're not qualified to
Okay, let him
make a
speak and
judgment
then we'll
on what we
continue.
believe
it
and what
is
we
in
don't
the
believe.
public domain that the president and his deputy, and particularly his deputy, campaigned against the constitution that we have. That
What
is
do
in
you
the
mean?
public domain. And it is going to be very difficult for them to implement a document they don't believe in. But let me tell
correction.
you about
So
something.
You will.
that
cannot
You will.
allow him to come on
you'll
national
get your
TV
time.
and lie to the public.
The
That cannot
Jubilee
be.
I will let you
Manifesto.
respond to that. Just finish.
What does a Jubilee manifesto say about corruption? I took my time to go and look at the Jubilee manifesto and their promise on corruption. Number one, they said they would give the EACC the power to prosecute corruption cases. Has that been given? No. Number two, they said they were going to set up corruption control units at county levels so that these then could escalate matters to EACC. Have these been established? No. There were three other promises that Jubilee made on corruption. They have not done it. They cannot come to Kenyans and tell us that wameshindwa. Kama wameshindwa to deal with corruption, that is a sure sign that Jubilee is incapable of ruling this nation, and it will be a tragedy if we entrust them with another term.
Well, first of all, there is no evidence that
through
Jubilee is incapable of ruling this nation, because we are ruling this nation very successfully. Thank you very much. Number two, you cannot allow my brother here to come on national television and lie to the Kenyan public and to the world. The president and the deputy president did not campaign against the constitution. The deputy president was on the no side, saying that he wanted the contentious issues, the articles which needed to be addressed before passing the constitution should be addressed before we take it to the public, before the referendum. The president himself was on the side of the yes campaign. So what is he telling us? You know, we must get our facts straight.
Let's bring us back
If it's
to the
politics,
fight on graft.
Let's be factual about what we're discussing. Graft, I said again, and I'll repeat, let us not politicize graft. If we're going to politicize graft, then we'll talk about Ouko, we'll talk about Raila Odinga, we'll talk about Ranguma, we'll talk about Kidero, we'll talk about the KQ issue, we'll talk about all these things where they're involved, but they're not talking. But the EACC has been doing a lot of work and investigating.
Could
let
I
me finish.
ask,
Let
if he has
me
such
finish.
evidence,
Let me finish.
just to
Let me
buttress
finish.
his point,
Let me finish.
finish.
Let me finish.
If he has such
You allowed
evidence
him to finish.
Gentlemen.
of corruption
Okay, let him
on the
finish.
opposition side,
In fairness,
what are they doing
in
about
fairness,
it
Kajan.
as the government?
Gentlemen.
The EACC, even at the county, even in Kisumu, where they had done investigations in the cases of the governor and the finance director and so on and so forth, and even the deputy comptroller general, the deputy controller and auditor general, they have cases they are actively investigating. What happens? These characters run to court, get injunctions from the High Court to prevent them from investigating, to prevent their arrest, and to prevent their charging in court. How then are we meant to win this war against corruption? When the people, I can go tomorrow and influence a tender, steal the money, and then I go to court, find a judge who's willing to play ball, and then get an injunction against my arrest, prosecution, and even investigation. And then I sit pretty and happily eat the money. So where are we in this fight? You know, and this is my learned friend, a lawyer, who is very well versed in the workings of the judiciary.
Which is what I want to go to, because
yet he is not addressing that. He's talking about politics and Jubilee.
So I want us to move away
Address
on
the
your part,
judiciary.
away from politics, and look at the other agencies. You have the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, you have the DCI, you have the EACC, you have the Attorney General's Office. From these other offices or public institutions, if you like, where do you see as well the ball being dropped? Or for you purely, is it a political matter and there is no merit in saying that they're also failing in one way or another?
Let's look at the chain, Sophia.
Okay.
The job of investigating economic crimes, where we set up EACC as a specialist body, could as well have been done by the police and the DCI. But we decided in our own wisdom, and copying from other jurisdictions like Singapore, for example, that set up a specialized unit to establish EACC. EACC has got powers to investigate. It does not have powers to prosecute. Jubilee promised they would give EACC powers to prosecute. They have not brought any bill to Parliament to amend the law to give EACC those powers. And that's why I say they've lied to this nation. And that's a fact. And I know that one you not even challenge, because there's nothing you have done on it.
I dispute.
Because EACC only investigates, forwards the files to the Director of Public Prosecutions. I'll give you the example of the Chicken Gate scandal. You've got a situation where people in Britain have been jailed and their assets have been frozen for bribing Kenyan officials. The Kenyan officials are still walking around and, strutting around, saying that they are innocent until proven guilty. The investigating
but
authorities...
But isn't that the case?
Yes,
and
that is the
case,
fact.
number one. And number two, the judiciary is also playing a role in this.
The investigating authorities take forever to investigate a matter that has already been investigated and closed in another jurisdiction. So, yes, is there failure on the part of some of these institutions? I would say yes.
Hallelujah.
But we must also acknowledge that there is a conveyor.
All right.
Don't celebrate yet.
I mean,
when EACC fails to prosecute the chicken gate suspects, what do you read out of that? You read that there is a political scheme to avoid besmirching the IEBC, which Jubilee was counting on to help them steal the next elections. And that is why we had to go to the streets.
We are going to have a new commission.
We are having a new commission, not because of the chicken gate issue, but because we went to the streets and because they killed people in Migori, in Siaya, in Homa Bay and Kisumu for us to get to where we are today. It is not an allegation.
It is an allegation.
We went to Kisumu.
Who killed them?
They were killed by the police. The police that is controlled by the Jubilee administration.
Killed anybody.
But who owns bullets in this country?
Even the ones that were hitting Raila's windscreen, we don't know where they came from. We don't even know if they were his or whose.
That Jubilee made to Kenyans that they would give EACC prosecutorial powers, which has not happened. Why is that?
Sophie, first of all, let's deal with the person
let's
deal with the person today who has prosecutorial powers, the DPP. He forwards cases today, 400 cases of corruption sitting in the judiciary's in-tray. Sitting in the judiciary's in-tray. We even created special courts called the corruption courts.
Maybe they're sitting there because there are too many, and that if EACC had prosecutorial powers, as you had promised, things would be easier.
Let me finish my point. Let me finish my point. The corruption courts, their function in life is none other than to deal with corruption cases day after day.
Right.
Not once a week, day after day, back to back until they finish. But what is happening? Instead of getting less, the backlog is getting bigger. Those courts are not functioning. Why? Someone has an interest in the judiciary not performing its function in prosecuting those corruption cases. Because the problem and the backlog that is there, and I'll tell you frankly, and I'll say it here on national TV, is in the judiciary. Let's call a spade a spade. In that presidential summit on corruption and accountability, nobody wanted to say where the buck stopped. The buck stops at the judiciary. And we are praying.
Absolutely.
We are praying against prayer. We are praying against prayer. Hang on. When six CSs are interdicted and the president removes them from office.
But the judiciary does not investigate. The judiciary depends on the kind of information comes to them.
Can I finish? Yeah. Can I finish? When 6 cabinet secretaries are removed from office, unprecedented in the history of Kenya. 4 permanent secretaries, unprecedented.
Many have called that a PR exercise
in the history of Kenya. But their cases are pending in court. Why isn't the court, dispensing with those cases? Justice delayed is justice denied. We all know this. And we all know another saying.
Courts do not operate in islands. EACC
we all know another saying. The law is an ass.
Thrice the budget that has been allocated to them. They are short-staffed. It allows people to be able to investigate.
There has never been in the history of Kenya as resourced institutions as they are today under the Jubilee administration.
All right,
the president and his government have given those people all my, and you said it yourself. He asked them, what else do you need that I can give you? Tell me now. I'll give it to you tomorrow. And they said nothing because they have enough. They have enough resources in
Not
the EACC.
according to the numbers.
They have enough resources in the judiciary in terms of the budget. And those people, by the way, let me tell you, they are more independent than others because they appoint themselves, police themselves, select themselves, and monitor themselves, and there's almost no oversight.
Our time is up.
It's the only institution that behaves like that in this country. So they have a problem.
I've got a firm belief in the judiciary. The Code Coalition has got a firm belief in the judiciary. The judiciary is guided by nothing else but the Constitution. We must accept and we must understand that the pace of cases will depend on the investigation, will depend on the prosecution.
But
so
you cannot
put all the blame on the judiciary.
What about the applications that are filed?
Chicken Gate did not even get to the judiciary. The judiciary has not received that matter because it has been killed by political forces.
Well, if you have evidence,
at the end of the day, we never voted for the judiciary or the DPP or the EACC. We voted for one man called Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy called William Ruto.
And also a constitution that has given independence
and I'm glad he's admitted that he voted for them. Thank you very much. I'm asking for a vote again.
Well, I said even if they won by 50+1.
No, we appreciate your vote.
We have accepted. There's a social contract, and we have given them that role to steer and guide the nation. If they have failed in the most fundamental issue, the most fundamental vice facing this country, I challenge them, if the kitchen is too hot, let them get out so that someone else can do the cooking.
All right,
but it will be a tragedy. It will be a tragedy to continue with this crybaby presidency for another 5 years.
So what I would want to see as a lawyer, I would want to see him getting involved, bringing evidence, pushing those cases, allowing the judiciary and the lawyers who are putting frivolous injunctions and applications, which is frustrating the pace of corruption or the fight against corruption. We want to see the bottleneck in the judiciary opened. We want to see the EACC allowed to do its job, looking at scrutinizing accounts of governors in Kisumu, in Nairobi, and elsewhere, even in Mombasa, where the governors are using their families and cronies to do garbage collection. We want to see investigation into those matters. So this thing must be across the board and must be honest. It must not be too political, because politically, we're winning anyway.
Member of Parliament, Ndongo Gethenji, Homa Bay Senator Moses Kajwang, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on Checkpoint tonight.